Well, you want to wait till I share screen?
Yes. Okay. Good.
All righty then.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for the financial aid presentation. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Katie Fitzgerald, the financial aid expert at Mission College in Santa Clara.
Yes, and don't panic. Just because I'm from a community college does not mean my presentation is just going to focus on community college financial aid, which I will be able to point out here and there. But no, because financial aid is one of those universal things, it applies to all college systems. And so I will be specific on when it applies to a particular system and not across the board. So don't worry, we got you covered. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And by the way, if you haven't seen the new Mission College, we have a beautiful new center plaza, which is a park-like setting, somewhat like my background. And this picture is our new student engagement center. So, you know, do a drop by, even if it's over the weekend. All right, so let's get started so we can stay on time. And then this is kind of where I like to start, because this is where we need to understand what's going on, why you think you're here, and hearing about financial aid and what is the concept, why am I doing this? And so just to kind of cover, a lot of families may wonder, do we need to apply? Do we have to apply? We're not sure we're in the right income bracket. And let me just tell you, there are more programs out there than you would think that don't really look at financial need across the board, surprisingly enough. So, and so I just listed a few of those to get you to understand that. So any student, regardless of need, can have an unsubsidized loan. So it's not need-based. We had tons of emergency funding that came to us that all students that were enrolled received a piece of that. That was from the pandemic. So, and that was our state and federal government providing funding. And so it was just actually easier to get the initial student aid applicants funded because they had an application in our system. So that was easier. And then of course, when you think about scholarships, you know, that could either come from the college itself or some outside organization. You know, a lot of times they're not looking at your income, they're looking at your student and what their background is. So think of it that way. Institutional aid, again, they're looking at different things, not always income, when they're trying to get you to attend their school, so to speak. And then of course, the California College Promise, you probably heard about this on the news. It's been around for almost a couple of years now. And this is where any first-time community college student can receive, you know, funding that will cover their tuition, so to speak, for up to 2 years free. So they're really not paying out of pocket. So again, that's regardless of any income level, and that's regardless of any other financial aid eligibility. So the gains are more than you thinking, I don't even know if we should bother. So free applications, pretty straightforward. It's about 30 minutes of your time. I would go ahead and do it. And as we all know, sometimes life changes, especially like when we have a pandemic and people lost their jobs. Having the ability to already have an application on file where maybe the student wasn't eligible before, but because the change in the financial situation, that can be looked at in a more current spotlight and say, hey, you know, we need to be reevaluated for financial aid eligibility. So that's why we're here. And it is a family decision. And you may say, yeah, we don't want to do it. And, you know, we feel financially secure that we're able to pay for the students' education, because that's what you're telling me. If you're not applying for the financial aid through the application process, then I'm guessing you're okay to fund their college education, because it's, you know, it's one or the other. But anyway, you get the idea. And then we're going to take a look. This is the, you know, perspective from Department of Education, they are there as the backup plan. They're not the front plan. And so they're there to assist families who would otherwise not be able to send their children to college. And that's why we go through the application process. And it does look at a lot of different things, not just income and assets, but it looks at how many are in the family, how many is the parents of the family financially supporting. Maybe you have an extended family situation now and you have another relative that may be living with you that the parents are supporting. That can potentially go into the head count, whether you claim them on income tax or not. And so, there's different little caveats, but of what they're looking at. But the bottom line is it starts with the family first, and what the family can or cannot afford is where financial aid can be the supporting factor in that. Okay, and this starts off why we're really here is let's talk about the money. So we have Pell Grant, which is almost $6,500 an academic year, which for us is 9 months, which is a pretty nice chunk of change. And so when you look at that, lifetime eligibility of up to 6 years, when you think about grants and scholarships, typically when you hear grant in the title, it's considered gift aid, not intended to be repaid. So that is the ideal type of financial aid that initially students would want. Yay, right? But the good news is it's looking at the support up through their undergraduate years. So with this program, it's already allowing up to 6 years to get that first bachelor's degree, a full-time equivalent. And if they go part-time, that timeline stretches, obviously, but that's why it's a good thing. And so really these are intended, gift aid is intended for those undergraduate years, okay? And then so supplemental grant, also, a great opportunity. This is where it does have limited funding, unlike the Pell Grant, kind of like a bottomless pit. If you're eligible, yay, you'll get it. And, Pell Grant can also be, some of that amount. Supplemental grant will, again, be another add-on as another grant. But it does look at first come, first served, most needy, which basically are the earliest filers, of course, within a cohort. And usually we look at the timeline between, October 1 and March 2nd, because March 2nd is our priority deadline. And so with that, it's also looked at those that are the lowest income families that really demonstrate the highest level of financial need. Okay, Teach Grant, pretty much what it sounds like. And so with that, it's up to $4,000 a year. And this is going to be for students that are typically in their junior, senior year at university, and they are in this major. To become a teacher, they could be working on their teaching credential or certificate, but somewhere along those lines that they are declaring that as what they're going to do. And then work study is a part-time job, another slide on that coming up, as well as the student loans. So again, just knowing that this money is there, it doesn't always have to, when we say up to, it means even a piece of that based on enrollment level and eligibility can always be brought out. So it doesn't always have to be an all or nothing type of thing. Okay, work study, really great program when students can fit it in. And yes, we want their academics to come first, but for students who may go away to college, this is perfect. They are living, taking classes, perhaps studying, if all goes well, and potentially working in between classes and study groups and things like that. And so they can do a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and it's great because it's typically an on-campus job, and some of the universities may have some off-campus contracts that are still right in that university environment. So it makes it very, very convenient. And again, this is a real job. They're getting paid, so they got money coming into their pocket. It's a really good program, especially for students who this may be their first work experience. So, getting those references for future jobs and things like that. And this is probably the only job they'd ever be able to call their boss and say, hey, yeah, I'm not going to be able to come in tomorrow afternoon. I have to study for a midterm or a final. And it's going to be okay, because everybody that hires these work study students knows that their academics come first. So it's a great, great, great opportunity. And so then we have the student loans. So the one under Department of Education is the direct student loan program, and it has different types. Subsidized, which it does is need-based. Unsubsidized, that's the one I mentioned earlier, that's not need-based. And then the plus is the parent loan for undergraduate students. And then off to the side, I do have private loans. There are private educational loans, but they do come from banking lenders, and they don't have any of the things that Department of Education has built into theirs. So, so the private loans don't have a fixed interest rate. They don't have grace periods for repayment. They don't have per se, all different kinds of repayment options and loan forgiveness and things like that. So those are the benefits with staying with the direct loan program and only borrowing a minimal amount from a private lender if you need to. But again, when you consider loans, you have to think about the big picture and how many years are they truly going to be in college? Are they going beyond a bachelor's degree, which could, we already know, be 4 to 6 years, just depending. And, are they going to go for a master's program or even higher than that? Or is there a credential involved? So you have to think about the big picture, because while they make it very easy to get the loan, Department of Education, students do not go through a credit check for the direct loans. Parents would for their plus, but so they make it very easy to qualify for it. And they make it very easy as part of the initial award offer. And so do you have to accept it all? What if they say, oh, here's $20,000 in combination? And it's like, that's great. It's like, but again, that's for one academic year. So, you need to balance what do we really need to borrow? And, and really think about, can we reduce it or decline it altogether? And so you want to consider that. And is there, the option for a part-time job that would fit into the schedule, which would also reduce the need for a loan. So anyway, just those kinds of things to think about. Okay, and then this is just another quick glance at what I was just talking about. And they do have fixed interest rates, which do change each year. And when the student goes into repayment, they can consolidate into one interest rate. Okay, so now that we've looked at federal financial aid, we're going to look at California-based financial aid. And what does that mean? It means that it's to be used at a California school. You're not going to be able to get a Cal grant and take it and use it at another school like in Arizona or Nevada. So it is for students that are intending to stay in California. And so they have all these wonderful programs. And Cal Grant has 3 different areas. So A is going to be university only, B is at universities and community colleges, and C is more of a vocational technical track. And so that's at the, specialty schools as well as the community colleges, because we actually have career technical tracks as well, like nursing, automotive, fire technology, those kinds of things. So keep that in mind. And then when we look at the university amount up to $12,570, that's the level at a UC system. And then in between, it's about $9,200 for a private school. And then for the CSU system, it goes between about $5,600 to just over $7,000, depending on the type of Cal grant it is. And then of course, the community colleges, that's me. And so we have, if you look at the initial CC 1648 with the little asterisk, we have a lot of add-ons, which brings us up to almost the university level. So we have an additional $4,000 as a full-time student. There can be another $2,000 for college completion grant that's tied into this. There could be another amount added on for parenting students, another amount added on for those that may be current or former foster youth. So you can see that all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's some pretty good add-ons. And so, you know, the program is very robust. It's our biggest program, obviously, in California. So it is really there to entice students to consider staying in California for their education. It does have a lifetime eligibility up to 4 years. And so students that may opt to start with the community college path, they can still receive their Cal Grant with us if it's a Cal Grant B. And if for some reason they're going into a 3rd year with us, they can then put it on hold for when they actually make that transfer to the university for that 3rd and 4th year. So they're able to do that. And again, putting it on hold initially for your first 2 years is not necessarily the best idea because you're losing out on money that you could obviously be paying and putting it away for when you make that transfer. So anyway, middle class scholarship. So this is kind of a new one, sort of, but it's kind of like, to me, Cal Grant Part 2. So Cal Grant looks at income and assets very specifically, and the number in the family, as well as GPA. But where the family falls off the chart, so to speak, based on income levels, then middle class scholarship can come into play with more flexibility on higher income families, which hence the middle class concept. So with the income and asset ceiling up to 191,000 now for this next year. And so it is only at the CSU system and UC system, so not the private California colleges nor the community colleges. But it's a great way to get money towards that tuition payment, because that's all of what this California-based aid is really trying to do, is assist families with the students out of pocket requirements towards tuition. So that's what they're really geared to try to save for. And then EOPS is also another program that's state-based. It's for students that may be first generation in their family to go to college, students from lower income families, students with disabilities and other special populations. And then the care piece is really for parenting students. So again, more money for them to support them. And then the child development grant is both at the community colleges as well as at the universities. But again, it's going to be major specific, much like the TEACH grant was on the federal side. And they're always coming up with some different programs. So California Student Aid Commission is our state agency that oversees all of our California-based aid. And of course, I have another slide on the enrollment fee waivers that we're going to get to in a moment. Okay, here's a quick glance, and just a reminder, since we're recording, and I'm going to be sending the PDF of this presentation to the schools. So they'll be able to post this, and you'll be able to reference back to it, because we're not going to spend a lot of time staring at it, but students are encouraged to create a web grants account with Student Aid Commission, the California Student Aid Commission, and that's going to help them track their grant. It allows them to go in and make changes. It's like, oh my gosh, the one I thought I was going to, that I listed first on my FAFSA as a California school, I'm not going to UC Santa Cruz, I got into Berkeley, yay. You need to update that information. So you want to make sure that the Cal Grant is going to the right school, in other words. Okay, and so here we are, fee and tuition waivers. So all of the different systems have ways to, provide that assist with tuition. The state university grant, and of course, if you're getting a Cal Grant, this may or may not come into play. Same thing, if you get this, then you may not need the middle class scholarship. So different things, but they're all one. Typically, they don't work in tandem. They work as a either or kind of thing. So state university grant, the UC system has their blue and gold plan. And then also the private schools, of course, have many different ways based on their foundation fundings and things like that to assist with tuition, because that's part of their, wanting to gain more students to attend their school. So they're always willing to do different deals with towards tuition, usually in the form of scholarship and waivers. Okay, and then the community colleges. So we have, it used to be the Board of Governors fee waiver. Now it is the California College Promise Grant. And I emphasize Promise Grant because we have a couple of different promises going right now with our system. So I call it CCPG fee waiver, just so that there's no confusion. That's the one that's waiving. We don't really call our enrollment charges tuition, we only for non-residents. So we call them enrollment fees. So it waives the enrollment fees. As an example, $46 per unit, typical English history class, 3 units, $138. That's one class. Then you start adding classes on where they may take 4 or 5. Now you're talking hundreds of dollars. That's what this waives, is those enrollment fees for their actual classes. Similar to tuition, we just don't call it that. So, so again, these are all geared to really assist families with the out-of-pocket expenses, as are the California-based programs. And then here's our other promise. So this is the one that I mentioned earlier about first-time college students, first-time community college students can potentially have their fees waived for up to 2 years. This is their enrollment fees again. So if they are eligible for that CCPG fee waiver already, then this would act as a scholarship, okay? And if for some reason they're not eligible for the fee waiver, then this would act as that fee waiver. So one way or the other, they're typically not paying out of pocket for their community college education, which is kind of nice because it gives them an opportunity to do some exploration, as well as families saving lots of money on tuition for their lower level undergraduate years. But anyway, yes, and this is not just for high school students. This is first time community college students of any age. So a first time student to college at a community college. So it can be older adults that are coming to school for the first time. Maybe they want to, do a whole different career path, whatever it is. But yeah, it's a great opportunity from the California community colleges. Okay, scholarships, an area that is overlooked so much. You hear the stories because it can take multiple applications. Sometimes you can get a break, and if you're applying at a college, they may have one application for scholarships, and then they will break it down to see what the background of the student is and consider them for multiple scholarships at one time based on one application. But for the most part, when you're looking at private scholarships, yeah, you're applying one at a time. So the trick is have the student create a personal statement, also known as a master essay, the profile about themselves, and talk about their strengths, their struggles, what was going on, what did they do for community service, how is this scholarship going to really make a difference in having them be able to pursue a higher education, what are they going to do when they get that higher education, how are they going to give back to the community. All those pieces make your specific student unique, and that's what you want to highlight. Nobody's had the same experiences that your student has. And so again, looking outside the box, where do I go for scholarships? Well, your local banks, a lot of times the big ones, not only do they have private loans, but they also have scholarship programs. So what about your employer, your credit union? You see all the things I have listed. So it really makes a difference to do some extra research, start in your own area, your local church, all different kinds of things, our community programs. It could be any number of them. And it's not always about the straight A student, and it's not always looking at income level or anything like that. Whoever's providing the money gets to determine the criteria. It could be very specific or it could be very broad-based. So again, just knowing that this is there, and again, it's considered gift aid, so we like it. Okay, now general eligibility criteria. From the perspective of both the federal and state governments, they really want to provide financial aid for those that are living here with permanent intentions. So oftentimes, this is why students that may be on a visa or other types of foreign students or international students are not typically eligible for our federal and state financial aid because they're here really with temporary intentions. And so with that being said, the student for the federal application should have a permanent Social Security number. And then if for some reason they do not have a permanent Social Security number, don't have one at all, or maybe they were issued one through DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, they would be able to complete the California DREAM Act application, which we call CADA. And so no Social Security number is required for them to complete that. And none of this comes into whatever the parent has for a Social Security number, where they don't have one at all, or they have a tax identification number for work purposes. Parents, they're not the ones that are the students, so their status does not come into play on the application process. And then, so it's all about the student, and it's going to be one application or the other. Some students are going to be able to do the FAFSA, some are going to be doing the DREAM Act. Okay, and then males, while it's not as restrictive right now for males to register for selective service, it's still a good idea that they do. Does this mean that they're going to have to be in the military? No, but it was a requirement for financial aid purposes up until just really a few weeks ago. And so they're relaxing that both on the federal and the state side. But again, you know, this is subject to change at any time. So they're always encouraged to go ahead and register. Again, does not mean that they would be forced to enlist in the military. It is just a starting point should we ever have a national state of emergency. And then, you know, basically already doing what your students are doing, which is completing their high school education, so that anybody for financial aid must have that high school completion status. And then enrollment levels, you know, so many myths about financial aid. Well, all financial aid has to be paid back. Well, it's not all loans. Now you know about grants and scholarships, which are not intended that way. And now you know that basically I'm telling you a student based on eligibility can take one class and potentially they could be eligible for our fee waiver, and they can be potentially eligible for a Pell Grant payment. Minimal it might be, but some's better than none. And so, most of the programs will kick in at a half-time enrollment status, which is usually a couple of classes. So that is the good news. Sometimes if they're enrolled half-time versus full-time, it may stay the same amount depending on the program, or it may be adjusted. So again, a lot of flexibility with that. But again, knowing that students don't always have to be full-time to get financial aid makes a big difference, especially if they're having to do more work hours to maybe, you know, make the next, you know, academic year's tuition payment. So just different flexibilities. And then some of our specialized programs, you know, again, from the state may require full-time status, but there's always exceptions, you know, for different student populations. And then of course, they have to make satisfactory academic progress to keep the money rolling in. And that includes loans and work study and scholarships. So they, you know, I don't know why sometimes it just, you know, sometimes you just take too much on and you might not do well that term, then yeah, it's a kind of a wake-up call that, hey, you know, you got to be careful of that. So you have to make the academic progress, which is really a C average, and completing 2/3 of what you attempt overall. So again, it doesn't mean everything's at maximum. It's not, again, about a high GPA or 100% completion. It's just, it still needs to get there though. And surprisingly enough, students can get into hot water taking too much on. And then enrolled in an eligible program of study is more geared at the community colleges because we cannot pay on an undeclared major. Some of the universities can for a limited time, but they must have an eligible program of study in community college. So they need to declare basically a major, and, you know, also, you know, with the flexibility, they can change their major fairly easily with us. It's not as big of a deal as it is with the university. And then, yes, the feds have gone high tech. And so, because we know students are on their mobile devices all the time. So they decided, well, if we need students to apply this way, this is how we're going to do it. And so they can apply for the application, set up their FSA ID, which you'll find out what that is in a moment. They can track their student loans, making sure, what's going on, how much debt do I have. College scorecards, kind of a big deal for looking at universities. What's their retention rate and what's their graduation rate? Are students staying there and getting to completion to graduate? So that's kind of a big deal for universities. And then just all kinds of, access to different information. So it's quite awesome. And parents can actually do their portion on the FAFSA, the federal application, via their mobile device now too. Because yes, students, this is their application. However, parents, you are going to have part of your information go in there based on your income and assets. So there will be parts of it for you to complete. And again, I prefer that the student is the driver, and then maybe you two sit together and then the parent can take over, but it really is the student's application. And if parents do the whole thing, a lot of times they kind of mix up which was their information versus the student. So best to have the student as the driver. A great website, because you can see there's different kinds of tabs you can click for more information about. It does translate into Spanish. That so far is the only language they've been able to get set up for an alternate. But they also have announcements. So it's going to tell you, oh, the system's down for maintenance for the next 24 hours or whatever it's going to be. It'll also announce, oh, we've got some glitches with the IRS data retrieval tool. That system is down as well, for a day or whatever. But that's where you look for any special announcements that may impact your filing the application or any other good news that they might have. Okay, and so this is the federal student aid identification number. So again, student as the driver is going to be the one to initially do theirs to start off the application. It's all their personal demographics. And so when they create the FSA ID, which is their electronic signature to submit the form, it's also going to transfer those demographics back into the application when they start it. And then again, one parent typically is going to require an FSA ID to also sign and submit, because you're providing information on here as well. And if for some reason the parent cannot create an FSA ID because they do not have a permanent Social Security number, they're able to print a signature page and then be able to mail it in. So that's not a problem either. And then typically the first opportunity for parents to create an FSA ID would be when they are getting to the income information section. And this is where they would have the opportunity to link to the IRS and be able to transfer their base year, because for the 2022-2023 academic year, which is a year out from now, they're going to be looking at 2020 income tax information. So if you filed, everything's good, you would be able to link to that and then have all the information that the FAFSA wants transferred right back into it. And so it's a beautiful thing when it works, but sometimes it doesn't work for everybody. Sometimes it's like, well, we were married filing joint, now we're separated or divorced. So we don't want to bring both parents' information and we only want the custodial parent. And then sometimes it's like, well, I wasn't married then, but I'm married now. It's like, well, guess what? Step parent comes into play, but because you didn't file taxes together, again, it's not going to work. And again, for parents that don't have a permanent Social Security number, would also not be able to do the transfer. And if they do not have a permanent Social Security number, maybe they have a tax identification number, a TIN, they will be using zeros on the FAFSA application as well as the DREAM Act application. So anyway, just little tips. And then looking at these little blue circles with the question marks, this is where you can always do a deeper dive into anywhere on the application where it's asking for something. It's going to tell you very specifically what they want for an answer. And that ties into our next area of assets. So they ask about cash savings and checking you have on hand. So income is prior, assets are current. So what do you have in the bank? What other kind of investments do you have? And do you have a corporate business or investment firm? So those are the three key areas that they look at. And again, for Cal Grant purposes, you don't want to skip over this. So you want to make sure that if it's asking you, do you want to skip the questions about your assets? you say, no, I don't, because we need that for the Cal Grant consideration. And so being really sure, and this information comes out of clicking on one of those blue circles, this understanding what it's asking for, what investments to include, what ones to not include, just be very clear on that. So it may be looking at additional real estate investments other than the home you live in. It could be looking at, stocks, bonds, those kinds of investments. It could be looking at college savings plans. So what it doesn't want is really the parents' retirement funds. So do not include those. So that's one of the big ones, but it's also, it gives you very specific information on that and how to determine the value. Okay, so California Dream Act, yay. So this one is, again, for students that do not have a permanent Social Security number, or they may not have one at all, but they are able to, just like the FAFSA, complete this one, and it's going to consider them for all of our California based aid and institutional aid and scholarships and all those other things. So a lot of different programs for them to get support with. And again, one parent at least will be assisting through that process. And of course, for those that may be looking at private colleges, there may be an additional financial aid application. And while the FAFSA and CADA are free to complete, this one is fee-based. It is the CSS profile. Our public California colleges don't use it, and not all of the privates do. So you want to be sure to, and as I tell families, always scrutinize the financial aid web pages information as much as you do just looking at that college and university for whatever you're looking for about their admission rates and other programs. So financial aid, you should spend as much time looking at that stuff as you do anything else. And this is where you're going to find out the information. What does it want? Does it require the CSS profile? What is the requested filing deadline? And that kind of thing. So it is fee-based, and you want to make sure it's required because of the fact that it does cost money to complete it. Okay, so dependency status. So this is kind of a tricky one. You have to remember that not all students coming to college are just out of high school. So sometimes they may be an older student. They could be a younger student that is a parenting student. There's all different kinds of students and ages and backgrounds. So this is why they're trying to determine whose information really needs to go on to the FAFSA or the DREAM Act. Okay, and this is typically the breakdown. So for most families, the student is going to age out at about age 23, 24, which means parent information is going to go on there up until about then. Unless they're younger than that and they actually start working on a master's program. So then they're considered a graduate student, and then they would no longer need to provide parent income information. So yeah, so be prepared that this is going to be your thing, providing information, because you do reapply each year. And so, yes, you're going to have to, both student and parent are going to have to be doing this. And there are exceptions to that. Sometimes it could be that a student is living with a different family member or is in a legal guardianship with people other than their biological parents. Could be that they have been in the foster care system after turning age 13. So it just depends. Any one of these can trigger that they may not have to provide parent information. And if it's not a biological parent, there probably is no real substitute other than an adoptive parent before age 13 that would provide their information. So, and that's why I say it gets tricky. But we are looking at typically parents to be married parents, separated or divorced, whoever the custodial parent is, parents that are remarried, so step parents information would go on there, and even parents that may be both biological parents but never got married, but they are living within the same household. So both of their information would go on the financial aid apps. Okay, and now getting into a little bit of the rocket science here. So how are we being determined eligible? So the application is not the program. They are just strictly the applications. And because students can list up to 10 of them on their financial aid applications initially, and then they can let it process, and then they can knock some off, add some more on as needed. But it's really the colleges that are getting this information that are determining the actual financial aid eligibility of the student based on the results of the application process. So that's why it's looking at income and assets. So what we have at the top of a basic math equation is cost of attendance, which you'll see what that looks like in a moment, minus expected family contribution as determined by the financial aid application, the FAFSA or the DREAM Act, equals the eligibility for financial aid. And so this is the components of a cost of attendance, also known as the student budget. And these are the allowances that Department of Education has come to realize that students may or may not incur, but they would rather allow for them in determining their eligibility, which is a good thing, because the higher the cost of attendance minus any expected family contribution, it means that they could still be eligible for financial aid, for need-based aid. So yay. So it's a good thing. And while we look at tuition and fees, which looks, oh, not too bad. That's because it's a community college. This is a real mission college student budget for a student who is living with a parent or relative. So again, but even with them living at home, there's still a room and board allowance, even for a community college student. We don't know if they're actually going to pay rent or not, but the fact that they put the allowance in is a good thing. Okay, books and supplies, transportation, miscellaneous personal. I'm not even sure that seems like a pretty healthy budget just for clothes. No, but you know what I mean? It could be a laptop and things like that. But anyway, so, you get the idea that this is a beautiful thing. So, but cost of attendance is going to be asked for when they are listing their colleges. It's determined by their housing plan. I'm going to live on campus. I'm going to live with parent or / relative is what that's supposed to also mean. Or I'm going to be living off campus, meaning totally on my own, roommates, what have you, we're paying our own way. And so this is what a glance would look like. So we already know expected family contribution determined off the application is always going to be the same. It's one result, but the variation is the different types of college systems. And the biggest triggers to that is the tuition and the room and board allowance. Okay, from on campus, that kind of thing, or even off campus. So it really is the biggest variable. And yes, don't forget that these are not the actual tuition costs. These are only the ones with all those built-in allowances that are actually fluffed, so to speak, which is a good thing. But it does show that there's financial need at all of them. And so again, special circumstances, I mentioned this earlier, sometimes things change. So from the time you're initially submitting, which is October, as soon as October of 2021, based on 2020 income, and they're not even going to school until 22, 23, holy Toledo. So yeah, there's room for a lot of changes. This is also why it's important if you file the financial aid application and it's in place, regardless of eligibility, it's in place. Should something happen later after this initial filing, and maybe one or both parents, there's a medical issue, there's a loss of income, a loss of employment altogether, anything like that is going to change those dynamics, and it can be quickly updated under these special circumstances with the financial aid office if the application's already on file. Or you can go ahead and file it then, but it could be much more limiting on what's available at the time. But either way, bottom line is there can be corrections done up through the academic year that the student is attending. So keep this in mind somewhere in the back of your mind. It's like what was then and determined our eligibility is no longer our current situation. And there's always information on the financial aid web pages about special circumstances and requests for reviews. Okay, timeline. We are almost there as of tomorrow, or well, I'd say even tonight. And since they're Eastern time, it could be as early as 9 p.m. our time. But anyway, so we are there at the opening time frame for next year's application for seniors. And so again, being mindful that we have about 5 months to file, and March 2nd is a priority deadline, and schools use that for a lot of, not just Cal Grant, because that's our biggest driving one of March 2nd, but also for their other institutional aid and different, institutional scholarships and things like that. So you definitely want to have it done by March 2nd, but private schools may request an earlier deadline. So you, again, want to make sure what are their dates, okay? So always be sure of that. Okay, and this is where you get to be the squeaky wheel, but more so on the student side, because when they come to college, they're going to be considered an adult and the college student, and parents will not be able to get information out of us for the most part. We can give you general information, but we're not going to give you specific information. And so, but knowing about what do I need to do? When do I need to do it? Is there going to be some kind of follow-up form? Probably. And when would that follow-up information and forms be required? And what is the impact if I miss that deadline? So, because sometimes deadlines can really rule out a student getting a financial aid award. And so you don't want to miss deadlines. Make sure you know what they are and what are the different types of deadlines in case there's additional documentation going to be required. Okay, and then just a quick glance, if students are going to be due a disbursement, we typically work with a third party. Most of the community colleges work with Bank Mobile. And so we also help them try to budget. So when they're going to get a disbursement, we'll do 2 major payments in a semester, 4 payments per academic year. So it just helps them stay on track for budgeting. And then Cash for College. So this is a statewide initiative geared for seniors. And so we want to provide the assistance to the families to get through the process. I believe the event for Mountain View is on, I think it's next week, right? Leslie, can you unmute yourself really quick to confirm that?
Hi, our financial aid workshop, Cash for College, is next Thursday at 4 p.m., 4 to 6:30
Right, which is
p.m.
October 7th, right?
October 7th, and you will be getting an email from the College and Career Center soon for the registration.
Right.
link.
And so while it is meant to be, and I believe is it 4:30 to 7? Can you?
It's 4 to 6:30.
Okay. No, I was
Okay.
close.
Yes.
Too
And we
many
will
of
have
them.
time slots based on last name so that it's not backed up and you're not waiting.
Right.
So
it is, yeah, it is intended to be a drop-in basis for you to get assistance. Like if you start the application after, October 1st when it opens, and you realize, oh, what about this? I'm not sure how we should answer that. This is for that drop-in piece. But trust me when I say the application is very user-friendly. It's got a lot of smart logic built in. Most of you are going to be able to get through this without giving it a lot of thought. And I don't want you to overthink it. I want you to be able to go through the process and not, overextend what it's like, wait, what are they asking for? Just be sure, to look at the blue circle question mark and see what they want for the deeper dive. But again, don't overthink it. Just it's like, yeah, okay. So I think, at the end of the month, after I paid all my bills, I have this amount in the bank, that kind of thing. Don't overdo it. But we are there to assist should you have hiccups or if you're getting ready to submit and you want us to review it before you do, that's what this is for. And so, yeah, drop-in basis. And then what to take away. So yay, we're almost done. So again, the most important thing I can stress is apply. Okay. Again, family decision. If you feel comfortable that we don't need to go through the application process, we don't want to expose our information out there, that's fine. But that's telling me that you're okay to pay for their education. If that doesn't sound right to you either, then you need to apply. And again, there's so many different programs that don't require financial need. So it really is a bigger deal to apply. There are more students that are going to college that receive some type of financial aid than are not. Close to 85% at a community college, almost that same percentage at a CSU, and probably close to 75% at a UC. So that is more that are receiving financial aid than not. So it really is worth your while to go through the process, consider all college systems, but for the Cal Grant, they need to have a California college listed in at least one of the first 10. So, so when they're looking at all those dream schools somewhere in the Midwest or the East, they need to still have a California college on there as a backup plan, just in case, so that they can be reviewed for Cal Grant eligibility. But yeah, and considering dream schools, consider all different systems as a big part of it too. And no, there's no magic potion for eligibility. I can't say, oh, you're a family of 4 and you make, 200,000. Where's your eligibility? I don't know. There's different offsets. It's a very sophisticated formula, which is the good news. And there's different things taken into consideration, like I mentioned earlier. How many are in the family? And is there an extended family that the parents are actually supporting? Who is living in that household that parents are supporting? How many might be in college at the same time? Do you already have an older student that's going to college and now you got a second one going in? Or maybe there's twins or triplets, so you got all of them going at once. So there's all different kinds of things that are taken into consideration. The age of the older parent, because they know you're getting closer to retirement, that's actually an offset against your income. So yay. So they do take a lot of different things into consideration. Do they take into consideration that we live in California and have higher expenses? No, unfortunately, because they still have to make it equitable throughout all the states. But still, it is what it is, but it's definitely a better opportunity to file than not file, right? Right. Okay, and then information, just some resources for you that you'll be able to grab when you see this. Again, whichever way you opt to do that. And then we're done. So I'm going to go ahead and have Leslie maybe stop recording and we can open it up for some questions.
Okay. Thank you, Katie, for that presentation. That was really informative. Yes, and I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now, and then Katie will answer your questions. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, again, thank you, Katie, for being with us tonight. And I also want to thank the MVLA Foundation, who helps fund our College and Career Center and all these great services that we're able to provide for you guys.
Yay. Okay.